Everything is happening through these screens.
How are we getting the most out of that person?
I want to see this thing grow long term.
Amazing story. You have such a unique perspective on that.
Schedule a 2-week vacation.
I applaud those models.
Undervalue.
Secure your digital footprint as well.
Why were they even put in place in the first place?
Only the most adaptable survive. Let's get to the leaders list. You can't hire when you need to if you're only looking when you need to. That's the talent gap trap, and that's what's on the leaders list today, along with Casey Wright. Casey Wright's the head of Chief of Staff, KC, and they've been helping companies stay ahead of the curve by filling those talent pipelines with the right people before the need gets urgent. And so if you're scaling, changing, or even just stabilizing your business, this is one worth listening to. I'm Bryon Morrison. Let's get to the leaders list. All right, Casey Wright, thank you for joining us on the leaders list.
Thanks for having me, Bryon.
Absolutely. So Casey, I was dying to have you on because there is this incredible shift that's happening right now in, staffing, hiring. Are we reducing staff because of AI? Are we bringing in the next generation and bypassing them if we're not? And so there's this whole talent gap trap.
Sure.
That I think is really, really compelling. And you, as president of Chief of Staff, Casey, I thought, you've got a great perspective on that. So I appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, let's go ahead and start off though with, we like to hear from people who are pros that are actually living it and going through it as opposed to pontificating.
Sure.
So tell us a little bit about Chief of Staff, KC, and tell us how you got into it.
Yeah, so I'll try not to be too long-winded. You've met me before, so I can go off on a tangent.
No, I like it. It's always entertaining when you're long-winded, so fire away.
No, so I've been in the recruiting business for 19 years now. I was fortunate to have the opportunity to buy in Chief of Staff. June of 2019, and we've grown very rapidly ever since. So we like to call ourselves Kansas City's recruiting firm. We stay very specialized in what we do, but we've got 7 different divisions here now. So I personally have always focused on placing people in finance and accounting roles, anywhere from your C-suite to entry level and everything in between, direct hire, temporary, temp to hire. But we also have divisions that specialize in sales, operations, marketing, IT, HR consulting, administrative. So last year we closed deals with just under 250 different companies here in Kansas City, anywhere from your multi-billion-dollar publicly traded international companies to pre-revenue tech startups to nonprofits and everything in between. So we've got a wide range of clients. We try and serve as many people as possible, but also stay very specialized in what we focus on.
So talking about specialized, why Chief of Staff? Why is the company called that?
So I have to give a nod to my predecessor on that. So I didn't found the company. So the company was founded in 2011. I took over in 2019. Chief of Staff was kind of a pun on a couple of different things. I don't know if this was a cognizant decision or not, but we got the Kansas City Chiefs in here. They're kind of popular here in Kansas City, so I'm sure that didn't hurt. We have found that a lot of people search how to hire a Chief of Staff, as a lot of people hire that from us. A Chief of Staff can mean a high-level executive assistant, sometimes a high-level office manager. Sometimes I've seen that be more of an operations role, where it's almost like a junior COO, if you will. And so it's been very fruitful for us, where people randomly do a how to hire a Chief of Staff search on Google or whatever platform, and they end up landing on our page. So Chief of Staff, yeah. It's got several different meanings, but it's worked and we've stuck with it.
That's great. And so we're going to come back to that in a second in terms of understanding like what Chief of Staff means, but I'm really, there's a great story. You've got to share the story on, how you decided this. That's a big difference. There's a lot of organization or individuals out there that are thinking about starting their own thing. I love the fact that you acquired another firm. So talk to us about that path.
Yeah, like I said, I've been in the business for 19 years. I'm trying to be respectful, but quite frankly, I fell into this industry. And I've always loved what I do, but I don't really love the industry. I think it's very transactional. And I've seen this time and time again, where the only thing that people are concerned with is how many people do we place and how fast and who can do it the cheapest, the fastest. And that's just not me. I'm a relationship guy. I've always been a relationship guy. my background's psychology. I love helping people out. I joke around that your house, your spouse, and your career are probably the three biggest decisions you're ever going to make in your life. And, I come from a background, large family. I know a lot of people, and I always thought people either, need to hire eventually or need to find a job eventually. So kind of fell into this career. Not too many people go to college thinking they're going to be in the recruiting industry. It falls in our lap, most of us. And I thought I was going to go to med school. I thought I was going to be a psychiatrist. Ultimately, I figured that'd be too depressing all day, every day. But, I joke around now that we're therapists more than anything else. And, I tried a few different firms, had a lot of success financially, but never felt that fulfilled. So I took a year off work from June of 18 to June of 19, sat out a non-compete, did a year-long road trip with my wife, my two little girls, which is the best year I've ever had. Wouldn't take it back for anything. The thought at that point was I'd probably start one when I got back, and started exploring a lot of different opportunities. I had many, many different offers from different firms here locally. I had a firm here in town that offered me 33% equity just to join the firm, but it wasn't the right fit. To me, if it's not the right fit, nothing else really matters. I had several large national firms reach out to me, asking me to open a Kansas City office. I had a handful of firms that were trying to recruit me to go run, a bigger market, Chicago or LA or Atlanta or Dallas. None of those felt right. And then I met the founder and chief of staff, Jessie Underwood. She's great. Her first cousin's a good friend of mine, and realized that we had a lot of overlap philosophically, socially, morally, et cetera. Not a ton of overlap professionally, though. And God bless her, she had her sixth kid, and it was time to move on to the next, take it to the next level. And so to me, I had some people give me trouble, like, well, why would you buy a firm? You've been doing this a long time, and the truth is, I've been in the industry a lot longer than our company's been in business. They're like, you've got a big name in this business. Why don't you do it on your own? And a couple of different things. One is I know my strengths and my weaknesses. I wanted to hit the ground running. I didn't want a lot of the headache of the startup, so dealing with some of the minutia, some of the things that aren't my strengths. Figuring out an office space, do the branding, get the systems in place, et cetera. The other thing is continuity. I know how many small businesses fail quickly. When I joined here, it was an award-winning business. It was a lot smaller than it is now, but it had a good reputation. It was just a smaller segment of the market that they serviced. And so I'm like, I'm going to come in here. I'm going to take the approach that I've taken for years now, throw some gasoline on it. Let's take it to the next level. So here we are now, 14 years later since the company's been founded. And that narrative is a lot better than, hey, this guy just started a rinky-dink firm from his basement. It's like, no, he took something that was already doing a lot positive and just trying to take it to the next level.
So smart. It is interesting because a lot of times business leaders will fall into business, just like you just said, but they start their own thing. And a lot of times that's ego driven. And so it says a lot about you to recognize you do have strengths and weaknesses. We all do. So by looking at an established foundation that let you move that much faster, it's really smart.
Yeah, I've got a lot more weaknesses and strengths, that's for sure. And they're pretty evident. So,
okay, so talk to me about, like you said, 14 years. That's a huge win unto itself. So, what stage of growth would you say that chief of staff is in?
I get asked that question a lot. We talked about this the other day, Bryon, but I bought it 9 months before the global pandemic hit. I didn't grow up in a world where being a business owner was really ever on the radar. I quite frankly, I didn't think it was a realistic possibility. But I've always been pretty fiscally conservative, so I always put away as much as I could for a rainy day, and not knowing what I was going to do with that money eventually. Fortunately, I was able to buy this without taking out any loans, which has been great. Haven't had to report up to anybody, which is really how I wanted it. But the stage of growth right now, we grew tremendously during the pandemic in opportunities in areas that we didn't think we were going to, not areas that I was setting out to. We had demand for salespeople. We didn't have a sales division at the time, but we also had no revenue for a couple of months at the beginning of the pandemic. And I looked myself in the mirror and a little flickering light bulb goes on. I'm like, come on, dummy. We know a bunch of salespeople. We can figure this one out too. So we launched a sales division. Then we had a lot of clients in blue collar spaces and construction and manufacturing and similar industries that needed a lot of operations folks. And again, that wasn't where we were thinking to grow next, but we went with the pitch, and we found opportunities to more well serve our clients and to expand our reach. So, within a year and a half of buying it, even though we were dealing with the global pandemic, we'd already grown exponentially. And so if you ask me like a year or two into it, we're light years ahead of where we thought we were going to be. And here we are, a little over 6 years into me taking over, and we're still a long way from the finish line. It's like, yeah, we're 14 years in the business. I joined 6 years ago. I had several other people join about that time, and subsequently several others have joined since. But it's kind of like it was a new version, Chief of Staff 2.0, if you will, starting in 2019. So I think of us as kind of a 6-year startup, but we're a 14-year company, and quite frankly, like, I think we serve more clients than anybody else in the city in terms of what we do. So, someone the other day asked me, well, why haven't you expanded to other markets yet? And I always tell people that I learned that pigs get fat and hogs get slaughtered. And I think sometimes just expansion, just for expansion's sake, is hubris. And it can be the kiss of death. And I think our industry differs drastically one market to the next. So even though we worked with 250 clients last year, there's over 10,000 companies here in Kansas City. So we've got a lot of market share to continue to take over here in town. I guess if you look me in the eye and tell me, yep, you guys have 100% of the Kansas City hiring market share, then it's time to start exploring moving into new markets. But for now, we're going to keep plugging away and doing our best to serve Kansas City.
That's great. Be the best in the best area, you keep building on that reputation that you've built. So, if I think about, like there's typically with startups, there's this stage where, your existence, right? You're just looking in the mirror and you're going, it's you and me.
Yeah.
And then you get to this point where there's a flywheel effect and the business is going pretty well. Then you have to decide, like, is this a great lifestyle business or am I going to grow this?
Yeah.
And so I'm curious, like, did you make a conscious decision? Because clearly like, how many people do you guys have?
We got 22 right now.
Yeah. So you're in this really important tipping point in terms of staff and infrastructure and challenge of business. Do you want to see that business scale up more, or do you look at this as like, this is pretty good and I like where I'm at?
Nowhere close to the finish line. No, I want to grow at the right pace. We're up to 7 divisions now. I mean, truthfully, when I took it over, it was really one division. It was one kind of narrow focus. And so, if you would have asked me 6 years ago if we were going to have 7 divisions by now, I probably would have said no. But there are opportunities that we got into. I've got several ideas that I've been spitballing and looking into for launching additional divisions, but a lot of it's going to be dictated by the market and the demands of our clients. So I think growing at the right pace is very important. Like, I want us to have the best reputation for everything we do before we continue to expand. Again, I think some people, not just in our industry, but in all sorts of different industries, like, we had some success with this, some success with that. Let's just branch out. And then that ends up biting them. We want to be the best at what we do before we try and take on more and more. I think one of the most common misnomers is bigger is better. Truthfully, I've got the best team in the business. I would take my 22 up against anybody's 100 all day, every day, twice on Sunday. I'm very confident we are as capable of being full service for any company as any other recruiting firm there is. But we're also small enough that we can pivot when necessary too, and we can expand to get into other areas. I started my career at really large, national publicly traded firms, and some things they did right, but pivoting was not one of them. There's lots of bureaucracy, lots of red tape, and all we do is this, and we do this every day, and we're going to rinse and repeat, make it very scalable. Quite frankly, I think it took away a tremendous amount of the quality, and it was all a quantity game, where we're the exact opposite of that. And so we want to continue to grow at the right pace, and who knows what's next? Who knows what's next with the administration, with the environment, et cetera. I know there's going to be things that we don't expect. And I tell my team every day that it's very valuable to know that you don't know what you don't know. None of us knew a global pandemic was going to happen. You say what you want about the 08-09 recession, but a couple years prior to that, no one knew the recession was coming. Like, there's all sorts of different hiccups, hurdles to overcome. And we're trying to be as prepared as possible to deal with those challenges when they do arrive. Yeah,
that makes sense. And you guys, it can be a feast and famine industry. There's, a lot of people know that. But if I were going to ask you, like, what are the without giving away any confidential information, but like, what is on your leaders list? Like, what's your big focus right now that you go, man, in the next 3 months, I'm going to get this figured out?
That's a good question. I mean, it all starts internally. We pride ourselves in having the best culture here. I mean, and this is not a pat on my own back. This is giving kudos to those surrounding me. But we've won a ton of awards. We've won the best place to work by several publications. We've won healthiest employer in Kansas City, fastest growing, company in Kansas City, number 1 recruiting firm in Kansas City. Like coolest office in Kansas City. We won some really cool stuff. It's been fun. But the truth is, there's so many unknowns out there. We just don't know what's coming next. So I'd say the biggest focus for the next few months is continuing to build internally. Because if we don't have the best culture here amongst our own team, how are we supposed to trust our clients to help them build the best cultures? Because that's what we talk to our clients about all day, every day, is focus on culture more than everything else. I mean, I say that every day, but we place people, not paper. And again, I think a lot of the advancements in technology give the perception that our industry is going to do away with myself and others like me. I think it's kind of nonsense. I think that doesn't focus on the culture. It's find the right person, hire for attitude and aptitude, and not just technical skill set. Yeah, we can find the technical skill set, but that's what AI can do. That's what other technology can do is, well, here's a job description that has 10 bullet points, and here's a resume that has 10 bullet points. That AI tool can put those together. We're focusing on the culture. So continue to improve our internal culture. And I think that shows into the market too. And that's why people keep coming back to us is like, hey, you've built something cool. We're trying to build something similar. And so we're using ourselves as a blueprint for how our clients can build their own cultures.
I love it. Do you guys, I mean, that is so important to a lot of people give lip service to culture. You guys, I mean, there's a reason you're getting recognized, right? So do you have any kind of a business operating system that you manage by or any kind of methodology?
Yeah, we go by EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System. So
sure.
I read Traction before I ever started here. It'd been highly recommended to me by a number of different people. And then Jessie, my predecessor, she was already using EOS. So we've used EOS implementers, but we have all sorts of different tools that we go by. Like I said, I try and surround myself with the smartest people. I do a pretty good job being the dumbest guy in most rooms. So I'm trying to learn from those that have been there and done it before me, not just in our industry, but all different industries. I've been blessed to be around all sorts of people that have been tremendously successful in all sorts of different walks of life. I'm trying to take a little bit of information and build our own company based on the things that I've seen that have worked and that haven't worked. Both the places that I've worked in our industry and then other companies, other industries across the board.
Yep. So speaking of what works and what doesn't work, like let's talk a little bit about where do you see the biggest mistakes and consistent problems that are happening in organizations as they're thinking about how to recruit and find the best talent. Let's just talk about like what are the common issues that you see today?
Yeah, I mean, back to the point I was making earlier about getting so hung up on the bullet points of a job description or the technical skills. The truth is, with nearly 2 decades in the industry, I can look at a resume for a couple of seconds, and 9 times out of 10, I know whether or not someone is capable of doing the job. And people get so hung up on that, whether it's the exact industry experience or, hey, we're a $100 million company. Somebody from a $500 million company is too small, or somebody from a $50 million company or is too big, or a $50 million company is too small, or different technology, different industry, et cetera. I think most everything can be learned. And that's why attitude and aptitude are the things that I focus on the most, because the truth is you can't teach those things. There are skill sets that are transferable that I think a lot of times aren't recognized. Someone might have 10 different software packages, but they don't have this one particular software package that the company uses. I'm like, well, they've got 10 experiences of learning a new one and becoming, an expert within a few months. I'm pretty sure they're going to be able to pick up yours too. Or, hey, we want 15 years of experience. This guy only has 10 years. They're not quite as strong. They don't have the 15 years of experience, but sometimes you look at somebody with 15 years of experience on their resume and truth is it's 1 year 15 times over again, and some, I don't think years of experience always is a great indicator of how qualified someone is. Look at somebody 5 years in their career, they've been promoted 4 times in 5 years. They probably have a higher level of skill set and understanding than someone's been doing it for 20 years that's been in the same role over and over again. It's funny too, because in my parents' generation, a lot of people would take a job and start counting down the clock to retire from there. And they're going to be there 30, 40, 50 years, whatever it is. And the truth is that's just not the case that often anymore. So whereas job hoppiness is usually seen as a negative, sometimes we get pushback too, where someone's been in the same place for too long. And so, diverse range of experience is really marketable. I hear frequently, well, they've been at XYZ company for 20 years. Yeah, they've taught them their own bad habits. I want to teach them my bad habits too, or make some joke like that. Where it's like, just because they've done it at one place doesn't mean that's necessarily transferable to the next. And so making yourself as broad scoped and marketable as possible, whether that's, hey, we work for, handful of years with a publicly traded company, and now we're working for a family-owned company, or now it's private equity owned, or this is a $100 million company that's been a $100 million company for 40 years and ain't broke, so they're not going to fix it. Versus they started off, it was a $5 million company, and 5 years later, it's a $200 million company. They've been through exponential growth, and so it's getting that wide variety is going to make you as marketable to the widest variety of options as possible.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. Do you think, I talk all the time about fire as foundation and future, like where's your head, and are we hiring in a fire environment where I'm thinking like, I just got to plug this specific hole, and that's why you keep seeing people with, no, I need that specific software because I'm not going to have them that long. And so I'm thinking about it in a transactional mindset.
There's an element of that, I would say. I've never thought of it in that exact terminology, but yeah, I could see that. I hear all the time, well, this is how we've done it in the past. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And like, all right. In some instances that makes sense, but clearly not all. Like even since I've been in the industry, how our business is done has changed tremendously. Like when I first got in the business, if I was texting with a client or a candidate, that was almost a fireable offense. That's back when you paid per text per month, and that was intrusive or invasive or whatever you're going to say. Now, half my communications via text, and so it's like you have to pivot with the times. You have to pivot the technology. What is normal? What's not? Just think of an interview. 99.9% of the time for the first several years of my career, if someone's going out for a first interview, a guy for this example, I'd say wear a suit and tie no matter what. Well, now if you show up in a suit and tie to a lot of companies, it's like, well, is this the IRS here? Or what's going on here?
Right, exactly. So I already did my accounting, right?
Yeah, learn the environment and be able to adapt to it.
Yeah. Well, okay, so what strategies do you and the Chief of Staff, Casey, recommend for assessing that cultural fit? How do you make sure that you're finding the right individual for the right opportunity?
The easy answer is talk to us. I think that's
okay. Well, if I talk to you, how are you going to help me decide whether or not that's the right match?
We meet with thousands of people every single year. I've been doing this for 19 years now. I can't even begin to count up the number of people that I've met with over the years. So I have a very large sample size, and I think that gives me some credibility and understanding. I come from a family of people, where naturally we're good at reading people. My brother likes to joke around that I've got an invisible tattoo on my forehead that only certain people can see that says, come up here and tell me your life story right away, because I do get to know people well. And, early on in my career, I was taught to ask, this list of questions. We had a sheet on our wall that said, while doing a phone screen with someone, ask them these 10 bullet points. And again, like it was regurgitating exactly what you saw on a resume or now on a LinkedIn profile, which didn't even exist back then. But I want to get to know people, for who they are. And not asking anything that, that's an HR violation or whatever, but really get to know who they are, because the resume is not what's going to make it the fit. It's some of the background in terms of where they grew up and what they're interested in. It's some of the personal factors that are really going to make a good fit. If you've got a office full of people that are huge into sports, someone that's a big sports fan is probably going to fit in better. If you have somebody that's really into music, that's going to probably fit in better. And so like we try and get to know our clients and understand where their values are. That's not necessarily political or religious or whatever else, but just who they are. It's like, and I ask people all the time, like, well, where'd you grow up? Like, well, why does that matter? I'm like, it doesn't necessarily, but you grew up on a farm in Western Kansas, and this client grew up on a farm in Western Kansas, you better believe that there's going to be an element that you're going to click better. It's just natural.
Yeah.
And so it's like getting to know people for who they are, not just what's written on a resume or written on some sort of bio sheet.
Yeah. How do you replicate that, Casey? Because basically you're a magician, right? I mean, like you've spent all these years investing, and that's why, like you got 22 of the best people in the industry doing that. That's a lot of magicians. How do you replicate that? How long does it take? Now I'm switching back to you. How long does it take for you to bring somebody in and turn them into something like that?
I don't know that I have a definitive answer for that. I see people all the time that try and hire, and not just our industry, but other industries, where it's like they find somebody that had whatever pedigree, and that person was a good performer for them. Like, well, let's just duplicate that, or let's replicate that. It's like, well, they went to this high school, and they grew up going to that country club, and they lived in this part of town, and they're in this fraternity or sorority or whatever it was. And well, here's another one that has a resume real similar to that. None of those things say anything about their personality. None of them do. Or none might be extreme, but very, very little. And it's looking for some of these soft and tangible skills. Like I personally like to hire people with a very wide variety of different backgrounds. I like hiring people from all different walks of life where we may disagree. Again, politically, come from different, upbringings, whatever, socioeconomic, religious, etc. But 98% of the stuff we're seeing the world the same way, and it's trying to figure out those things that really matter to people. And it's a learned thing, but it's a natural, innate thing. I think one of the biggest flaws people in our industry make is they either take too much of this capitalism, type A, aggressive sales personality or mentality, or an overly altruistic, and not that altruism is bad. Please don't take that the wrong way. But where it's like, hey, we just want to help every single person, to the point where it's like, we want to provide value to every single person, but realistically, we can't place every single person we meet too. They may be the best person in the world, brilliant, wonderful, great job tenure, but they've got a skill set that's very specific. And if we don't have demand for that, we can't just manufacture demand for something that's totally outside the box. So we're going to do what we can to help them out, but that doesn't mean we're magicians, as you say. But it's really just time. It's like we focus on quality, but you have to go through quantity to get through quality, or to get to quality. Like early on in my career, and I still hear it every once in a while, someone will be like, "Oh, you're interviewing someone. What are you interviewing them for?" I said, very rarely, if ever, am I scheduling an interview to interview them for a specific job. Now, some of my clients might hear that and be like, "What? I thought you were going out there and interviewing people just for this job." No, we're going to vet them for the job, but that is very different than interviewing them for that job. Meaning the vast majority of people I place, quite frankly, I've known for a long time. I mean, sure, there's people I've placed and, that I've met in the morning, happen to have something perfect for them, get them an interview that afternoon and get them hired in less than 24 hours. But more often than not, it's years later. And you got to start off early on. And I don't think most people have the patience or the wherewithal to put in the effort on the front end. I'm going out and meeting with people every single day, breakfast, lunch, coffee, happy hour, dinner, you name it. And early on in my career, people were like, "Why are you meeting with that man or woman?" And the truth is, I don't know. They're like, "Well, are they hiring right now?" No. Well, are they looking for a job? Well, no. Well, don't waste your time with them. I'm like, no, I'd rather talk to them when they don't need me. Put in the effort to get to know them when they don't need us. Try and be a value add, however we can. Sometimes somebody will reach out to me and be like, "Hey, you were recommended. I'm looking for a new CFO position, but I got to be honest with you. I'm 3 rounds deep on 2 different companies right now. I don't want to waste your time." Like, you're not wasting my time. I said, I might be able to help you negotiate when it comes down to an offer stage. I said, maybe you'll hire people from us in the future. But what happens frequently is when I take the time to help those people, knowing we're not going to get paid at that point. You know, they're already getting reeled into the boat. You know, they're a fish on. But then I treat them right. I take care of them however I can. 2, 3, 4, 5 years later, they're in the market again for a new job for whatever reason. We've already got that relationship established. So we're not ambulance chasers. We're going out there and putting in the groundwork on the front end. Or the business owner who owns a $2 million company that probably doesn't need or could afford us right now, but they're looking to grow. You know, and once they hit the business journal and, hey, you know, this company just got funding and now they went from a $2 million to a $50 million company over the course of 10 years or 5 years. Well, everybody in town's calling them then, but no one was calling them when they were a $2 million company. So we're just trying to put in the groundwork early on and create those relationships and be loyal to people.
Casey, how many organizations that you work with do that kind of groundwork? So, like as an example, I mean, I worked in an organization where we knew talent was our primary differentiator. And so I had everybody in the organization at the leadership level identify 10 individuals, 10 candidates that they thought were really, really exceptional that have jobs. And I said, I don't want you to try and hire them. I want you to know them. Yeah. And so they just go out and they built that relationship. And then we ended up hiring quite a few of those people eventually because they were just connected. And so, like, how many organizations do you know, like, think that way, that methodically about, you know, filling their talent pipeline?
Unfortunately, not very many. I think there are some that do it well, but unfortunately, I think that's the exception, not the rule. You know, I get asked weekly, if not daily, from somebody that I know that happens to know someone, you know, that has industry experience. They're like, hey, are you looking to hire right now? So-and-so finds themselves on the market. They're moving to town. Their company just went out of business, whatever it is. Like, are you hiring right now? And I said, always and never. You know, like if there's a talented person, we're always going to talk to them. You know, we're always going to talk to them, even if we don't have a quote unquote, you know, open role. We're gonna take care of the best people for sure. And some of our clients do that. Honestly, our best client relationships do that. Like I said earlier, we place people, not paper. You know, I like to joke around. It's like, I'm going to put the right 5 guys out on the court and roll the ball out, and they're going to score and they're going to win the game. It's not necessarily just going to find a point guard or go to find a center or power forward or whatever it is. If you've got the 5 best athletes on the court, you're going to win more often than not. And I think companies need to do a better job of that. You know, I'll tell you who is pretty strong with that a lot of times is public accounting firms, where they know anyone's going to be a value add. If you got the right background, you got the right pedigree, they can always get more business and better serve their clients. But more often than not, people do look at it transactionally. It's like, hey, our HR manager is going to retire in 3 months. We need to replace our HR manager. And so then they start looking. But the truth is they probably knew 2 years in advance that that person was getting ready to retire. I tell folks all the time, go on a first date. That's not saying you're going to go to the altar, but start that relationship. And maybe you're not looking, you know, maybe you're not even looking, but your skill set matches up really well with theirs. And you know that the organization you're working for right now is going through a transition. Maybe they're preparing to sell, or, you know, maybe a new leadership team is going to come on and bring their own people on. Don't get caught where you're desperate. Go out there and network and you got to establish relationships somewhere. And so starting those conversations early, that doesn't mean it's a formal interview. I tell people all the time, go have a coffee, go have a beer, you know, do a lunch, get to know people. Worst case scenario, you're expanding your network and you're meeting a new friend. Best case scenario, it leads to what could be a career changing opportunity. Yeah,
I love it. So let's talk about, you know, I'm running a business. I got a couple hundred people. I've got, you know, somebody certainly in HR. I've got recruiting in place, just in terms of at least an applicant tracking system. I've done the basics, right? What should I have on my leaders list with regard to talent today in this environment? What should be some of the tactical things that I've got to get right in the next quarter?
Meaning, what should they focus on in terms of hiring internally for themselves?
Yep. If I want to start to win the talent war and I've got an SMB, where should I be focused right now?
Well, adaptability is probably the biggest thing, and knowing that markets are going to change. They're always going to change. You know, it's like before the pandemic, I had very, very few clients that were anything but 100% in office. You know, that's just the way it was. And I think here in the Midwest, in Kansas City, a little bit more old school approach than maybe, some bigger markets or coastal markets where maybe have been more progressive with their approach to using technology and remote workforces. And quite frankly, cost of living is more outrageous in some of these other markets. So even if you get someone in the metro, that might mean a 90+ minute commute each way. And so it's like, all right, that's going to be hard to get somebody in the office every single day. But, if you can come in here 3 days a week and work from home 2 days a week, we'll work with you. We saw some of that pre-pandemic in other markets. We didn't see much of that in Kansas City. Now, post-pandemic, or whatever you want to say this time frame is that we're in right now, some of those things have stayed on. It's you got to adapt with the times. And the days of clock watching, your butt's in the seat at 8 o'clock and you're there till 5 o'clock and your lunch is from 12 to 1. And that's not realistic anymore. Now, certain jobs you have to be. There's certain jobs, construction and manufacturing, where you're on site. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I get that. Some leadership roles, like you need somebody in there with oversight. But I think the notion of, if they're not in the office, they're not working. Truth is, if you can't trust your people to be working from home, you've got the wrong people in general, in my mind. And again, I know everyone.
You built the wrong environment. You don't have that kind of trust. Yeah.
I mean, we've got a lot of flexibility here, but we've tried to build out a culture where people want to be here. I do think you learn through osmosis, and I do think it's good to be surrounded by the energy of your team or whatever. But there's no one here that, hey, I got to work from home, whatever. I was out for a bachelor party this weekend, and I don't want to get out of my sweatpants. So be it. I've got a plumber coming to deal with an issue. So be it. Whatever. I trust all my people. To be flexible with that. I mean, with technology, it's becoming easier and easier to work in different locations. But also it's like, know the market. I had somebody call me a few months ago, like, hey, we're looking to pay this, tell me all about the role. We get to the time to talk about compensation. I'm like, what are you looking to pay? And they tell me, and I'm like, I think I spit my coffee out on my computer screen. I said, well, tell me, where'd you come up with those numbers? Like, well, that's what we paid last time we filled this job. I said, okay, when was that? They're like, 6 or 7 years ago. So you could have told me 1920, like times have changed, and you have to realize they're changed. And sometimes compensation comes back down too. This time last year, we saw a lot higher salaries than we see right now. It's a supply and demand thing, just like anything else. So thinking that, we've done it this way before, it's going to work. That's not a very good mentality.
Man, Casey, something you just said about adaptability, hiring for adaptability. There's so much change taking place. Like you said, the work environment itself, AI is literally changing roles. Some people I talk to about, management roles. Management actually, in a lot of situations, I would argue is going to look like managing AI agents.
Sure.
Like we're in some environments, like we're literally, that's going to be your staff.
Yeah.
So that's an entirely different mindset. So I think adaptability is a really smart consideration, which speaks to your point about, hire the best athlete.
Yeah.
But how many organizations do you see where they're actually thinking about how they structure for adaptability? Like they put that kind of work in ahead of time, or is that something that people are saying like, no, we built the foundation so they can work from home. We've structured around the, how and when they come into the office. How much do you see people really building a great structure around building culture, but giving adaptability?
That's a good question. I would say I probably see that more based on individual to individual than organization to organization.
Okay.
Like I'll see leaders of one division that are like, hey, I know what's important because this has been important to me. And so I'm going to try and be flexible. And sometimes, they get, it gets deadheaded by whoever is the final decision maker. They try and work with us to get creative with it, though. I would say that's probably more relevant, each person running the division, than it is company to company from what I see.
Yeah. That's a super interesting point, right? Because that's that balance between how am I creating the right environment? I always use this metaphor about the house plant, right? I mean, so like house plants keep dying every time I buy one. I kill the house plant, right? Yeah. So it's clearly not the house plant.
Yeah.
Like I don't know how to water it correctly, and I don't know a good location to put it in.
Yeah.
So that's what I always think about is like, how are organizations building environments where every time I bring in the plant, it's going to grow and proliferate.
The healthiest ones are certainly looking to the future. Unfortunately, I don't think that's the vast majority. I think there's plenty out there that do. But, a lot of people are stuck in their ways. We've done it this way. We're going to keep doing it this way. I've got countless examples of that.
Yeah. Man, this has been so helpful. I don't want to keep you all day, but is there anything else that you'd recommend that, like, if I I finished watching this and then I'm like, man, I'm going to call Casey because I'm going to get his perspective. Certainly if I'm in the Kansas City market, I'm calling you.
Sure. Yeah.
But what else should go? And by the way, we'll put your information in our speaker notes so everybody should be able to reach out. But is there any parting thoughts of wisdom that you want to share with folks who are going through this process of trying to navigate the talent gap?
Yeah, one thing I always advise candidates, and I do this specifically for Kansas City, I think you can take it to a larger macro level too, though, is I don't think people are always good at leaning into their own personal network. And I say Kansas City in particular, I think we're an incredibly friendly town. I think people naturally want to help others, but sometimes there's a niceness to a fault where you've got a neighbor, you've got someone you go to church with, you've got the parent of your kid's soccer teammate or whatever that you've known socially for a long time, but maybe never really had any professional overlap with. And they might be looking at you thinking, oh my gosh, they'd be great for our organization. Or I'd love to introduce them to so-and-so because it seems like they'd have a lot of synergies, they'd get along well, but they don't want to assume anything. They see that, you've got a high level title, you've got a nice house, a nice car, seems like a good lifestyle or whatever. It's like, well, they don't need my help. I don't want to intrude. I don't want to step on any toes. And so people might be thinking about you for something that they're never going to reach out to you about for fear of potentially offending, but lean into those networks. I mean, when someone's looking to hire, they're mitigating risk. And one of the biggest risks when someone's switching from one company to the next is just figuring out like, A, are we going to be able to trust each other? Is it going to be a trusting relationship? And B, is it going to be a good cultural fit? If you've got somebody within an organization or at least has a close relationship, it may not report up to them. They may not be part of that division at all, but say, I've got a church with this guy for 15 years. He's the highest level character person you can imagine. He's always the first one to chip in whenever we need help with something. Like, it's an integrity. It's a character thing. You get rid of that risk, and then you can focus on all the technical stuff sometimes. So like lean into that personal network because it is valuable. Like people want to take care of those that they know and they like, and don't be ashamed of that. Don't be bashful about it.
I love that. That's my big takeaway from this conversation is just how are you consistently investing in your network and starting to recognize just good. Like this individual is good, period.
Yep.
Like that's a great foundation to start with.
Yeah, absolutely.
Casey, this has been great. Thanks so much for being on the leaders list, and highly recommend that people reach out to you and just like not necessarily just in terms of if I work in Kansas City and I want a job, but I would recommend people reach out to you for exactly what we just said. Like learn from each other, and I think you've got a lot to offer. All right, Casey, thanks so much.
Yeah, Bryon, good talking to you.
You too.
Thanks.